Good day, guys. Welcome to the 2 weeks web development bootcamp. And this is the third day of the bootcamp training. The first day, we were able to cover introduction to HTML, looked at all of these topics under day one. Then, under day two, we were able to look at how to create order and unordered list, how to add tables to present data in rows and in column. We looked at embedding multimedia. Then we also looked at introduction to form, input types, drop downs, and check boxes. That was where we stopped in day two class. So, and I did say that we are going to continue from where we stopped because unfortunately we couldn't finish up the topic for day two. So we're going to continue from there. Then we glide into um, CSS, introduction to CSS for day three. All right, so let's move on. So I'm going to start with explaining what is inline element, block element, and also talk about div and span before I can start explaining semantic tags and why semantic tags are important for accessibility and SEO. So that's what we are going to be looking at before we move on to CSS. So go straight to um, a Visual Studio Code. So I have a README file here. You just have to ignore it. So this contains um, topics that I'm going to be explanation of topics that I'm going to be treating today on block element, inline element, div, and span. So just ignore it. You don't have to have a README file. So we're going to create a new folder inside of the parent folder, which is called 2 weeks bootcamp. So you should be able to create folder by now in your text editor. So before we do that, let me accept someone. Let me allow someone in. All right, you're welcome, Maraba. You're welcome. So I'll create a new folder here. So I'll make sure that the focus is on the parent folder. Then I can right click on new folder. I'll call this class 3. So I'm going to create an HTML file and I'll call it, what should I call this now? Inline inline block inline block.html inline block.html. So I'm going to generate HTML boilerplate. So you already know how to do that. So I'll change the title from document to HTML inline, or let's start with block and inline element. So HTML block and inline element. So before we start writing codes, let's first of all look at the meaning of block element and inline element. So I'm going to open this. So here it says that in HTML, elements are broadly categorized into block level and inline element. You see that now? It says in HTML, elements are broadly categorized into block level or inline level element. So any HTML element that you know or any HTML element that we have in HTML are broadly categorized into two levels, which are block level and what? Inline level. These categories affect how the elements are displayed in a web page and how they interact with the surrounding element. So let's look at block level element. Block level elements are used to structure the main layout of a web page. So one of the use case of block level element or the purpose of block level element is to structure the main layout of a web page. They create a block of content, typically starting on a new line and taking up the full width available by default. So they are used to structure the main layout of a web page, and they usually start or typically start on a new line and they take up the full width available. You get that now? Is that they take up the full width available. So let us look at key characteristics of block level element, which is new line behavior. So every block level element usually start on a new line. So block elements always start on a new line. They automatically stack vertically. They are arranged vertically. They stack vertically. They stack what? Vertically. So by default, block elements stretch to take up the entire width of their parent container, regardless of the content inside. Regardless of the content inside. So please pay attention to this concerning block element. Block elements stretch to take up the entire width of their parent container, regardless of the content inside of the block element. And if they are not in a container, they will assume the width of the browser's viewport. They will assume the width of the browser's what? Viewport. We are going to look at that in practical now. And let's look at height and width. If we can set height and margin to block level element. So they can have margins and paddings on all sides. Their heights can be controlled explicitly. Their height can be controlled explicitly. That means you can control it by yourself. You can determine the height of a block level element and or can be determined by their content. So you can determine the height of a block element explicitly, or it can be determined by their content. Can be determined by their content. So let's look at nested elements. So it says block level element can contain both block level and inline block. So you can have a block level element nested within a block level element. So that's what it's saying here. You can have a block level element nested within a block level element. A block level element. So let's look at examples of block element. Number one, we have div, we have paragraph, we have H1 to H6, we have the OL and the UL, unordered and ordered list. We have the list itself. We have section. We have article. We have footer, header, aside, main. We are going to look at all of these. But let me show you a practical example. If you come to the file here, and I do something like an H1, and I do this is heading 1, for instance, and I open the live server. Let's see what we are going to get. Okay, good. Look at this, what we are getting. So we don't know if truly this is a block element or not. You get that now? We don't know truly if this is a block element or not. But in theory, we know that H1 to H6 are block level what element. But how can we understand that in practical? So this is what we are going to do. If you are using Chrome, I don't know of any other browser, but I'm well familiar with Chrome, and I think other browsers too can. Okay, hold on. Um. Oh, sorry. I thought I was sharing my screen. My bad. Sorry about that. Thank you for bringing that to my notice. I thought I was actually sharing my screen. All right, so this what I did here. I created what do you call it? Of course, you will see it in the video when it's being uploaded on YouTube. Good. So let's just move on. There's no time. So here we have this is heading one. So how do we know this is actually a block level element? So there is an extension that I want us to download in Chrome. I already have it, but it is called pesticide. It is called pesticide. So let's just go through it together. So I'll come here, I'll search for Web Store, Chrome Web Store. I'll go to the first website. This is the official website here, chromewebstore.google.com. So I'll click on it and okay, still loading. Yeah, so this is the website. So what I'm interested in is the extension part. See here, look at you're asked to what search extension and theme. So I'll come here, I'll search for pesticide. So you have pesticide for Chrome. You have pesticide for Chrome without overbar. So you can pick any one of these. So I'm just going to click on this one here. Pesticide for Chrome without overbar. So I'll click on it. So it is already installed here. So once you just click on it, probably you see something like install there or something. So let me remove this so you can see it. We can do that together. Hold on. Remove from Chrome. All right. So I've removed it. It's going to let me cross check if it has been removed. Okay, it hasn't been removed. So let me remove this. I think I had two actually. It has been what removed. So I think if I refresh this page now, uh, let's see what we have. So you can see that you are not seeing anything like install there because we've removed the one that we have. I removed the one that I have. So I'm just going to click on this and let's see. You will see something like add to Chrome. So let's say this extension may soon no longer be supported because it doesn't follow best practices for Chrome extension. Hmm. So let's look at the one without the one with over effect. So let's say pesticide. Let me click on this. Let's see if we're going to get the same warning or something. So I'll click this. All right, I think we are getting the same thing. We're getting the same thing. So let me go with the pesticide for Chrome without overbar. So you see something like add to Chrome here. This button, click on it. Then you see this part here that says add extension. So I'm going to add it to the list of my extension. So you see it has been added. So right, it has been added. So I'll just come to this part here. I'll come to the extension icon here. I'll click on it. Then you will see what is it? You will see this pesticide for Chrome. So I'm just going to pin it to the toolbar. Pin it here and look at what we have. So good. I think we are done with that. So we are going to use this pesticide to check if truly the inline element is sorry if this H1 element is actually a block level element. All right, so I'm going to click on this pesticide, this icon here. Once I click on it, it's going to show us like a rectangular box, and I'm going to talk about this when um, when we get to the part in CSS where I'll be explaining box model. So let's just take it gradually. We are going somewhere. All right, so I click on the pesticide, then it highlights this element area for me. So can you see, though the content is not spanning the entire width of the browser's viewport, though it is what a blocking element. It's a block level element because the width of the element spans the entire width of the browser's what viewport. So it means that if I want to add another element, for example, I want to add like a paragraph that says this is content of heading 1. For example, if I, so this is content for heading 1. So you see that the paragraph will come under. So let me click on the pesticide again. So you see because H1 is a block level element, meaning it takes the full width available, and by default, since it's not in a container, it's assuming the full width of the browser's viewport. So any other element that will be coming that you are going to be writing in your VS Code will be displayed under the H1, will be displayed under the H1. So even this element here, this paragraph, is also a block level element because it's also spanning the entire width of the browser's what viewport. So with block level elements, we can define the structure of our web page. They are also called structural elements. We can define the structure of our web page with what? With block level element. So you see that now. So this explain or this goes to this explain um, the, explain practically explain that block level elements start on a new line. They all start on a new line and they are stacked on top of each other vertically. So you can see how paragraph is under each one. So if we have another block level element now, it's going to come under paragraph. See that now, it's going to come under paragraph. So this is how we define the structure of our web page. And we have list of block level elements here. We have paragraph, we have H1 to H6, they are all block level elements. We have the UL and the OL, which represent containers for the list. They are all block level element. The list itself is also a block level element. Then we have this HTML semantic tags. They are all what block level element. So let's look at the use case of block level element. It is used for structural layout, to structuring layout. That's one of the use case of block level element, and it can also be used to group content into sections, grouping content into sections. So let's say if um, you have okay, for a website now, a website consists of multiple sections in a page. A page now consists of multiple sections. You can have the let's say for example an e-commerce website, you can have a product section, new feature section, you can have trending section. So this section have what relatable codes, relatable HTML elements that we can group into what sections. So that's one of the use case of block level element, grouping content into what sections, grouping content into sections. So that's that. So let's look at inline element. Inline elements are used to style or to manipulate text. Please take note, inline elements are used to style or manipulate text or smaller chunks of content. Inline elements are used to style or manipulate text or are smaller chunks of content. They do not start on a new line and they only take up as much width as necessary for their content. They only take up as much width as necessary for their content. So let's look at the key characteristics of inline element. Number one is that it doesn't start on a new line. No new line. And inline element do not force a line break. They flow with the text and other inline elements. They flow with the text and other inline elements. So as regards to setting width and height for inline element, their width and height are determined by their content. So the width and the height of an inline element are determined by their content. You cannot directly apply width and height property, though it is possible with CSS using display inline block or similar. So let's look at margin and padding. Margin and padding affects only the left and the right side, but not the top and the bottom. See that? But not the top and the bottom. This particular aspect is called box model in CSS. We are going to dedicate a day, like 2 hours for that video, or less than that actually. So inline elements are contained within a block element. Inline element must be placed inside of block element. So examples of inline element, we have span, we have hyperlink, that's the anchor tag. We have strong, which denotes strong importance, usually bold. So we have emphasis, we have bold text, we have italic text, we have image, we have mark code, label, all of these things they are what? Inline element. And I think I did explain yesterday, I talked about that a bit, that input element are inline element. Label is what? Inline element. Even images, image tag is also what? Inline element. The link tag, that's the hyperlink, is inline element. Inline element. You see that now? They are inline element. So they only take up the they only take up as much width as necessary for their content. So let's take for example, we have this. Um, you can have a link here. Watch. You can have a link. You can call this click me. Look at what we are going to get. Is it? Can you see? You are seeing click me here. So if I come here, I do another link tag here, and I say, uh, uh, let's call this apply. So you will see that the next link is not going to start on the next line. They are stacked side by side each other. So the reason is because the link is an inline element and they only take up as much width that is necessary for their content. So if you use this pesticide now, you will see that it's not taking the full width of the browser's viewport. Rather, it's taking the width that is appropriate for its content. So this is inline element. They don't start on a new line. Unlike block level elements that start on a new line that we can use to define the structure of our web page. So that's that. So with the help of this pesticide extension, you can see that we can see how H1 paragraph is a block level element. So I think I've done justice to that. Um, let's look at div. Let's look at the meaning of div and what span. So div is a block level element, while span is an inline level element. So let's look at it. He said the div and the span elements are two of the most commonly used HTML elements. Honestly, by the time you go deep into web development, you will realize that div and span are two of the most commonly used HTML elements. They are generic container. Please take note. They are generic containers with no inherent styling or semantic meaning. It doesn't have any inherent styling or any semantic meaning, but they serve different purposes based on their default behavior and use cases. So what is div? The div element is a block level container used to group content into logical section. So they are used to group content into sections. It is typically used for layout and for structuring the web page. You get that now? The essence of div is to group content into sections. Is to group content into sections. You can have a section of a website. That section consists of related or relatable content. You get that now? So those content are put inside of a block level container such as div, which is a generic word container. You get that? So the characteristic of div is a block level element. It starts on a new line. It takes up the full width of its parent element or parent container by default. It is used for grouping content into logical word section. So it is ideal for grouping related content or elements that should be treated as a unit. I love this. It is ideal for grouping related content or elements that should be treated as a unit. As a unit. Take for example this website that we are going to be building at the end of this training. Still loading. Now you will see that this website consists of several sections. So you can call this section here as the header section, or you can call it the nav section, the nav bar. Then you have this part here. This is another section. You can call this a banner section or an hero section. Then you have another section here for new product. So this new or this there's a section here for new product. And from our definition here, it says that it is ideal for grouping related what content or element that should be treated as a unit. So you can see that div is ideal for grouping related content. So you can look at all of these content here. They are related. So it is being grouped into is grouped as a single unit. So all of this content now are grouped into a container. You get that now? So we have this section here. We also have this section here. We have this section here. And we also have this section. We have this section. We have this section, and we have the footer section. So altogether, we have several sections that have related code or related HTML element or content. You get that now? So all right, let's move on. So it has no default style, but can be styled heavily with CSS. Can also be used with JavaScript to add interactivity. So it is used for grouping content for layout. So let's take, for example, this path here. Um, let's have this. I'm just going to, okay, let me create a new file here. I'll call it div and span .html. Generate a boilerplate. I'll call this HTML div and span element. So let's say we want to have a group of relatable or related content in a section. So let's define like three sections. Want to define the um want to define the header section, want to define the body section, the main section of the website, and want to define the footer section. So this I'm going to do. I'll have a div here. So I can just do probably like let's call this can do this h2. I'll say logo, then we'll have the nav bar, or sorry, the menu items like the page links and all that, page links. So I'm going to do a UL. So the UL will have LI. So you want to list out the page links. Just like the way we have it here. We have page links, home, women, men, shop, pages, blog, and contact. You want to have all of these. These are page links. So when you click on this page, when you click on this link, it's going to take you to a different page entirely. So they are called page links. Page link. So to create a page link, you can use unordered lists like this. So and if you notice, they are clickable. So to be able to achieve this, we are going to nest element inside of another element. So we have um, li. So inside of li, we are going to have a link. See that now? I'm going to have a link and I'll call this home. So since we don't want to go anywhere or we don't want to direct, when we click on this link, we don't want to direct it to somewhere. So we have to give it what hash. So this hashtag here. So what this hashtag means is when we click on it, it's going to take us to the top of the page. That's the essence of the hashtag, is to take us to the top of the page. You get that now? So we have home. So I'm just going to copy this and duplicate it like 4 more times or something. One, two, three, four, and five. So let's see what we have here. Women's, men, and shop. See, um, women's. Let me make it capital. Uppercase. Women's. Am I correct? Women's, men's, and shop. So the other one will be pages, blog, and contact. Pages, blog, pages, blogs. See blogs. Okay, pages, blog, and contact. Contact. So the home should be all in uppercase. Yeah, so this is what we have here. So you can see that all of these, this code here, the logo and the page links are relatable with content. So we need to put this content in a section or in a container. So the generic container we are going to be using is what div. So I can collapse this because it's too long. Let me collapse this. So I'll collapse this I'll come to this UL here. You see, collapse it. So this is what we have here. So we have the UL and the H2. They are relatable content that we put in a generic container like div. So how are we going to know? Because this is not readable actually. How are we going to know that this content actually is for the header, is for the head section? So what we are going to do is whenever you are using a generic container, it is best you give it a class value, sorry, a class attribute or an ID attribute. So in this case now I'm going to give this a class attribute. So this class is very important whenever you are it's very important because you're going to be using it to style the elements in CSS. So when we get to that, we'll talk about that. So I'll just give this a class attribute and I'll call this header. So when you see my code and I'll be like, okay, the content that is inside of this div container, this generic container, is actually what header. So it's header. So since the div is just a generic container, it could be a container for anything. So we have to what label it by giving it an attribute called class, and the value is what header. So we'll do the same thing too. I will say div, and I'll give it the class of um, content, and do content, and let's do let's look for what we can use. Let's say um, let's do something like H1 Samsung Samsung S24 Ultra. Then I can have like a note on that. So I can just do lorem 50. Then I can um, get an image. So let me just do this. So I'll say Samsung. Samsung for Ultra image. So let me let's see. So I'll just click on this. Let me use this. Let me use this. Let me use this. So I'll right click. I'll copy the image address. So I don't want to download it. So under the paragraph, I'm going to do I'll create an image tag. So I'll paste the email, the address in the source attribute. Then I'll give this alternate text, probably like I'll say Samsung S for Ultra. So if I save, you see that now. So I'm going to collapse this. So you see that's this div is holding relatable content on the head section. This is the content. Then we're going to have a div for footer. So I'll just do footer. Okay, sorry, I'll give it a class of footer. So what am I supposed to add here? Let me see if I can get an idea from here. So okay, let me just do this. Copy this, come here, you paste it here. So in case if you want to this copyright symbol, if you don't know how to get it, just do copy, just do ampersand, I mean what do you call that thing, and do this. So you see, it's going to generate um um the copyright symbol for you. So 2024, my website. So look at everything intact. So I'm just going to right click and open with live server. So look at what we have here. Why is the image not showing? Okay, so can you see? So all of this is a website. You see that now? This is a website. This is a website. So this part here is if I use pesticide now, you will see that the logo and the page links they are in a container. This section here, the Samsung S24, the content and the image in one container, and the copyright 2024 my website also in one container. So you can see how we put this web page in sections used with the help of what div with the help of div. So let's look at span. Let's look at span. So where is it? Span, characteristic of span. Okay, yeah, this is it. So you see what is span? The span element is an inline container used for styling or manipulating a small portion of content within a block of text. Within a block of text. Um, it says okay, let me read it again. Sorry, I was distracted. The span element is an inline container used for styling or manipulating a small portion of content within a block of text. Within a block of text. So that's the use case, or that's the meaning of span. And the characteristics of span is that it is an inline element. It doesn't start on a new line, and it only takes up as much width as its content. It is used for small styling. So it says that best for styling a specific part of a text or content within a block level element. Within a block level element. Like div, it has no default style but can be styled with CSS or manipulated using what JavaScript. So let's say for example, because here it says that it is best for styling a specific part of a text or content within a block level element. So let's say we want to style a specific part of a text. So I want to style this part here. Mm, let's say this part here, I want to style it. So in order for me to style this particular portion of the text, this particular part of the text, in order for me to be able to style this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it and put it in a span. because if I use a block level element, it's going to alter the flow, the layout of the content. But in order for me to still maintain the flow, I had to use what? Inline element. So I cut that portion of text that I want to style separately from other text. Then I put it inside of what? A span tag. You get that now? So with this span tag, I can style it. So if I save it now, you might not notice anything here actually. There's nothing, like they might not notice anything here until probably I style it. Though we've not done CSS, but let me show you this inline styling. So I'll just do style and I'll say probably I want the color to be um yellow, I guess. If I save, look at what we have. Can you see that part of the text is what? Yellow. See? Nice. That part of the text is yellow. So that's that about um, div and span. So let us look at where is it? Let's look at semantic tags. So let's go to the notes. Mm, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah. Okay. Introduction to semantic tags. Introduction to semantic tags. Semantic tags describe the meaning of the content they contain. Please take note. This is semantic tags are still block level element, just like you we have div, but it goes beyond that because div is a generic container. But with semantic HTML tags, it describes semantic tags describe the meaning of the content they contain, making web pages more accessible and SEO friendly. So look at common semantic tags. We have header, defines the header section of a web page. Footer defines the footer section. Section, we have groups related content. Then article represent an independent piece of content. I love that. Independent piece of content. Then we have nav, contains navigation links. Then we have aside, which which means a sidebar content, often supplementary to the main content. You get that now? So instead of having this tag here that we have here, where is it? This div that we have here, this we have three divs here, and we give it the class of header, this one to deal with the class of content, and this deal with the class of footer. We can use a semantic tag for it, and there will not be need for what class. You get that now? It still doesn't mean that I can't add class for styling purpose actually. So I'm going to create a new file here and I'll call it semantics.html. So I'm just going to copy everything here in this part here, this div and span. I'll copy everything and I'll paste it here. So the only thing I'm going to change is the title. That's not the only thing actually. So let me just change the title as the first thing I want to change. So I'll call it semantic semantic tags. Yeah, semantic tags. So here, look at we have header tag here. So instead of having a div and giving it a class of header, we can just change it from. Let me collapse this URL. I can change this from div to header. You see that? I will change it from div to header. So change it to header on both sides, like for the closing tag, for the opening tag and the closing tag. So change it. So we can still maintain this class of header, but I can also remove it. Let me remove it here. So you can see. So here it says that semantic tags describe the meaning of the content they contain. Can you see? It describes the meaning of the content they contain. Can you see all the contents here? We now know that the content in this header container simply means header. So they are content that relates to what? Header. So here we have div with a class of what? Content. So this content part here, we can just give it section. So I can collapse this div here and give it a section. I can give it a main tag or section tag because we also have a main tag here. I think there are 7 common semantic tag: header, footer, section. Okay, header, footer, main, section, article, nav, aside. So um So here I can call this section. Actually, can call this section. So let me just remove this class here. Although later on, of course, semantic tags does not replace the need of adding attributes to you know to HTML elements. You get that now? We still need to add attributes. More on that when we get to CSS. All right. So this pattern now, instead of having div, I'll change it to what footer. I'll change it to footer. So let's clear this. Let's clear this. So you can see we are good to go. And if I right click and open new with live server, can you see we are still getting what? The same thing, guys. We are getting the same thing. We're getting the same thing. So all right, let's move on. So we are done with HTML. We are done with HTML. I'm done with HTML. So let's look at CSS. I think I wanted to say something, and I've lost my train of thought. I wanted to say something. I remember something, and I said I was going to communicate it. All right, I'll remember in the course of the class. I'll remember. So let's look at CSS. 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 Okay, yeah. It says why semantic HTML is important. Accessibility helps screen reader interpret content, improves the browsing experience for users with disability. For SEO, search engine optimization, search engines better understand and rank content. Proper structure improves discoverability and maintainability. Code is easier to read, understand, and what maintain. So let's look at CSS. Let's look at CSS. So what is CSS? CSS simply means cascading style sheet. It is a style sheet language used to control the presentation of web pages. While HTML provides the structure and the content of a web page, CSS is responsible for the design, the layout, and the visual aesthetics. So let's look at key features of CSS. Number one, separation of concern. So if you're a programming language, you always come across this word separation of concern. CSS allows developers to separate content, that's the HTML, from presentation, making code easier to maintain. So CSS, you can have a CSS file separate from your HTML content. So that's what it's trying to say here. So CSS allows developer to separate content, that's the HTML, from the presentation, that's the CSS, making code easier to what? Maintain. So another key features of CSS is that it is a reusable style. Reusable style. So CSS defines styles once and apply them across multiple elements or pages. So you can reuse a style on across multiple elements or pages once you have defined the style. And customizable design, changing fonts, colors, layout, and animations to create visual appealing website. So why cascading? Cascading refers to how CSS applies rules. Please listen. Cascading refers to how CSS applies rules. Styles from multiple sources, e.g., browsers defaults, user style sheet, developer defined styles are merged based on priority. Priority is determined by inline styling, internal styling, and external style sheet. So we have inline styles, which has the highest priority. We have internal styles, and we have external what style sheet. So we're getting there. So here it says the difference between different types of CSS, the inline, internal, and external CSS. So CSS can be applied to HTML in three primary ways. We're not going to be spending too much time on the inline and internal. We're going to be focusing on the external. But let's just have a knowledge, an understanding about that. All right, so CSS can be applied to HTML in three primary ways. One, inline CSS. So inline CSS, it is written directly within an HTML element style attribute. So for the inline CSS, it is written within the HTML element. So let's take for example, let me expand all of this here. Let me expand all of this. Yeah. So let's say I want to style okay, this one now is a practical example. So look at this. You have this span here, and inside of this span, the content of the span is this text here. I want to style this text separately from other text. So we come here inside of the opening tag of the span. Then we added what? A style attribute. So this style attribute is what helps us to be able to add CSS style rules to a particular element. It helps us to be able to add CSS style rule to a particular element. So, or CSS property to a particular element, property ranging from color to font size to font weight to font what would I call it now? Font style, text transform, different types of properties that CSS provide for us. So it is inside of this style tag. Sorry, style attribute. Sorry. So we have this style attribute, and this how it works. Let me do it again. So you see inside of the opening tag of span, please take note that whenever you are writing inline CSS, first of all, you have to target the element that you want to style. So which element you want to style. So once you know the element you want to style in the HTML content, you go to the opening tag of that element. That's if the element has both opening and closing tag. But if the element is a self-closing tag, just do it there. But if the element has opening and closing tag, go to the opening tag, then type um type the what they call it, the style attribute like this. So you have the style attribute here. So I hope the style is correct. Let me see. All right, it's correct. So inside of the code, that's where you're going to have your style rule. So you have to now determine, you have to now know what do you want to do, what style rule or properties do you want to set for this element or for this yes for the content of the element. Do you want to change the color? Do you want to increase the font size? Do you want to alter the font style? Do you want it to be italic or whatever? Do you want it to be bold, like the font weight? Do you want to change the structure, the display? Do you want to change it from block to inline element or from inline element to block element? Do you want to do other things? So you have to know what you want to do inside of the style attribute. So here in this case, let's make it very simple. I want to change the color of this text. So I will do color. So the color is simply means CSS property. Color is CSS property. Then I'll have to give it a value. So the value for the color. So after I've defined the color, I type the CSS property, which is color, still inside of the quote. Then I do double column, then I type what? The value of the color, which is red, and then I end it with what? A semicolon. I save. Once I save, though, when I save the semicolon was the semicolon, you can't see the semicolon anymore. The reason is because I'm using prettier prettier, a code formatter called prettier. You get that now? I'm using a code formatter called prettier. So once I save this now, you can't see the semicolon again. So if I come to the browser, look at, you are seeing this red text here. So this is how to add inline CSS. So let's go over to the extension. I told you, I think the first day or the second day of the class, that I'm going to show you some of the extension you that you need for your development phase. So if you want your code to be like mine, if you want your icons to be like mine, so let me show you. So come here, come to extension. I'm going to show you different extensions that you need to download. Number one, okay, I already showed you live server. That one is very, very important. So I'm sure you've downloaded that or you already know that. So let's look at the material icon team. So if you want to get this kind of icons, you come here. If you want to have this kind of icons, can you see these HTML icons? You want to have these folder icons and all. So just go to the extension, search for material icon team. Yes, I think yes, material icon team. So this one here, can you see? Material icon team by Philip Kev. So material icon team. So just install it. That's all. That's all you need to do. Install. So once you are done installing, this is what you are going to do. Come here. So once you are done installing, just come to this settings, come to this setting symbol here. Click on it. You will see theme. Yeah, you will see theme. Then you go to file icon theme. So under theme, go to file icon theme. Then you will see some defaults and all that. So just click on material icon theme to make it your default icon file icon theme. Then the icons will change automatically. You get that now? And also you need to download Prettier. Prettier code formatter is very, very important. It helps you to format your code appropriately. So you just search for Prettier. So it is called Prettier code formatter. Prettier. So look at it here, Prettier. Let me expand this. Can you see? Prettier code formatter. Prettier code formatter. So I already have mine installed. So just click on install. So once you are done installing it, all you just have to do is go to this setting again. Then you will see what is it? Then you see the setting keyword there, the search, get the setting keyword, click on it, then search for what do you call it? Search for formatter, or yes, just search for format. Just type format. It's going to bring out this filtered result for you. So you can see my default formatter is what? Preacher code. Yours might not be preacher code. Yours probably might be null. I guess yours might be null. So you just have to. So if you have installed the preacher code formatter, so you change it from null to the preacher code formatter. Can you see the default is what? None. That's null. None. So change it to preacher. Where is it? So come here, click on preacher. So that will now become your default formatter. Then also you will see something like format on paste. So when you paste the code and you save it, you want it to be what? Once you paste the code, you want it to be formatted automatically. So you check it. And if you also want to format on save, when you save your file, you want to format it automatically. So also check what this save. Check this checkbox. Click on this checkbox here to check it. So I think that's all. So and also um come on. What is the search bar? Okay, let me clear this. So yeah, um let's search for word wrap. Word wrap, yeah. Just type word. It's going to bring out this. So see, this controls how lines should wrap when you are coding. So this controls how lines should wrap. So if you don't set it to on, because by default is what? Off. So you have to set it, you have to turn it on. So just click on, so it will be turned on. All right, so I think we are good to go. So you can clear this clear the search input. So just clear. And what again? I think we are good to go. So you see file autosave. So my own is not on autosave. So you can keep your own as after delay. Like as you are typing, it's saving automatically. So and we have on focus. So we have on Windows change, but I prefer to keep my own off. So I want to be the one to save my file myself. So you get that now. So if you're not cool with it, you can change it to after delay if you want. So aside from that, what other thing again? I think you need to install auto rename tag. So you see auto rename tag. So install that one too. Install auto rename tag or install auto rename tag. Then also install auto close tag. Yes, still by the same author, John Han, abi Jun Han, or whatever. So install these two as well. So and you will see once you are done installing them, especially the auto rename tag. See something here. If I come to let me cancel this tab here. Let's say for example I want to change this H1 to H2. So this auto rename tag, once I come to the opening tag and I delete one here, it's going to be deleted on the closing tag. So if I add two here, it's going to be added there. You see that now? So that's one powerful tool, auto rename tag. And which other extension you need to download again? So I think you just have to keep it cool. Just leave it like that. Um, and if you want my theme, if you want to have this kind of my theme, I think it is called Git. Is it um, GitHub theme? Okay, I think it's Copilot theme. Yes, Copilot theme. Yes, yes, Copilot theme. I downloaded two different theme. I installed Copilot theme and also installed Flatland Munukai theme. So this was the one I was using before, Flatland Munukai theme. So I just find this nice. So after some time now, I might get tired of this theme and decide to change it. But currently, I still like the theme. So you can choose any theme of your choice. It doesn't have to be my theme. Use your own theme if you like it. And if you want to use my theme, no problem. All right, so let's move on. So once you are done with that, you can now, whatever theme that you download, just come to the, or install, come to the settings and go to theme here. Click on theme, then you will see something like color theme. Click on color theme so you can see by default, I set my own to Copilot. So whatever theme that you installed, set it as your default theme. Then you're good to go. So I think that's all. That's all. So let's move on. Back to our code. So yes, yeah, I remember. So that's the reason why when we end it with semicolon and we save, it removes the semicolon because that's the only property that we are setting for this. That's the only property that we are setting um for this tag called span. So that's the only property that I'm setting for it, CSS property. So color. I didn't want to set more than one CSS property. So that's why we need to add what? The semicolon. So let's say I've set the color property and I want to set another property. So after the value of the property, I'll just do semicolon, then space to define another one. So probably which one should I use now? So let me say Mm, okay, let me do font weight. So I can say font weight. I'll give it a value of 600 and I save. So can you see? You can't see the semicolon for the last one. So the last one will always be removed. The semicolon for the last property will always be removed. So you see, if I save now, and you see the font weight is bold. The font weight is bold. Is thicker than other um, text that we have here. You see, that's nice. So that's that about inline CSS. So that's not my focus actually. So my focus is external. So let's get there. So let's look at the advantage of inline CSS and the disadvantage of inline CSS. Let's see it. So here it says that advantage is quick and convenient for small changes. So if you want to do just small changes, you can use inline CSS. And disadvantage is it is hard to maintain for large projects. It is very, very hard to maintain for large projects, and it violates the principle of separating content from presentation. Remember the separation of concern. So it's hard to maintain for large projects, and it violates the principle of separating content from presentation. You see, one of the advantage of inline CSS is that, let's say for example, you have like um let's say for instance now you have like 10 paragraph in your content, in your HTML file. You have 10 paragraph that you want to give the same styling. You want to apply the same styling rule to that paragraph. If you are using inline CSS, you have to define the styling rule for each of the paragraph. You see, that is very stressful. So that's just one of the disadvantage of what using inline CSS. But the advantage of inline CSS is if you want to do a quick change, just a small change, you can use inline CSS. So let's look at internal CSS. So internal CSS is defined inside a style tag in the head section of an HTML element. So it is defined inside a style tag in the head section of an HTML document. So let's take for example, I'm going to convert this now. I'll convert this to um I'll convert this inline styling to internal styling. So how am I going to do that? So inside of the head tag, because from what we have here, it says that we define internal CSS inside a style tag in the head section. You know, for inline, it was style attribute. Now for internal, it is style tag. So you can see the progression from style attribute to style tag. So we are going to define a style tag inside of the head section of our HTML document. So you can do it before the title tag, or you can do it after the title tag, whichever one you like. So let me do mine after the title tag. So I will type style. I'll press enter. It's going to generate the opening and the closing tag for me. So what I want to do is I want to convert this inline CSS to what? To internal CSS or embedded CSS. So now, since CSS helps us or supports separation of concern, so now we want to have our CSS code now separate from the HTML element or content. So now we have to specify, because now we have the style tag. So now we have to define the element we want to style, because we have several elements here. So we need to know the element we want to style. So apparently the element we want to style, or yes, we want to style, is called what? Span. So now how can we now select the element inside of the style tag? Because we need to be able to select the element we want to apply a particular style rule on. So that is where CSS selector comes in. CSS selector helps us to be able to select HTML element, and there are different types of CSS selector which we are going to be looking at. So let's start with type or element selector. So CSS type or element selector helps us to be able to allows us to be able to select an HTML element by its tag name. So it allows us to be able to select HTML elements by its tag name. So in this case now, we want to style this span, but we need to first of all select the span tag. So to select it, we need to select the span. So the name of the tag is what? Span. So that is called type or element selector. So I will come here. This is how it is written. So I will expand the style tag, and I'll do span. I'll type span here. You see? Span followed by a curly brace like this. Span followed by a curly brace. Then I want to set the color. So then I'll begin to define the property. I'll begin to define what the property. So you see, the span is the selector. So this is a type selector, selecting the element by its tag name. Then I then inside of the curly brace, that's where I'm going to provide the CSS property. I think the first one is color red. So I'm going to do this color double column. So you see, it's bringing out all the colors that we have. It's bringing out all the colors that we have. So I'm just going to do red. Then I end this property with what? A semicolon. So if I want to define another CSS property, all I just have to do is to press, is to hit on the enter key to create a space. Then we'll now do font weight, type font weight. Then I say 700. Then I end it. You get that now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of this here. I remove the style tag, sorry, the style attribute. I'll remove it. So I'll save. So look at what we have here. So can you see we've converted the inline CSS to what? Internal CSS or embedded CSS. So look at this, very good. So if you save now and you come here, we are still getting what? The same result. You see that now? We are getting the same result. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on. So this is what we have here. And if you come to the note here, so let's look at the advantage and disadvantage of internal CSS or um, embedded CSS. The advantage is it is good for single page application. It is good for single page application, but disadvantage is it is not reusable across multiple pages. So this is what it means here. So whatever styling that I define in this HTML file is only for this HTML file. So if I want to apply that same styling in another HTML file, I'll just have to copy this and paste it in that HTML file, which is not good. So you see that, so you cannot use it on multiple HTML file. That's the disadvantage of embedded CSS. It's only limited to a particular HTML content, a particular HTML file. So you get that now. So that is disadvantage. So now I'm going to now transform this from internal CSS to external CSS So the external CSS, this is where we have our CSS file separate from our HTML file. So this is where we have CSS file separate from HTML what? File. So this is what we are going to do. So inside of class 3, I'm going to right click on class 3 and I'll create a new file. I will call it style.css. Can you see it? Style.css. Like I said in the beginning of the class, that the most important part of naming a file is the extension .css. So all this, the style, they are just convention actually. So style.css. So now I have a separate file from the HTML file. So what I'm going to do is this. I will just come to, where is the part? I'll come to the semantic. Okay, that's the HTML file. I'll come there. I'm going to copy, or I'll cut out this span, this particular span tag and the property here. I'm going to cut this here. I'll cut it. So I'll remove the style tag. I'll remove it. I save. So I come to the CSS style, style.css file, then I paste it here. You save. You see that now. So now you can see that we've been able to separate our CSS file from what our HTML word file. So now how can we marry the two together? How can we connect the two files together? So to connect the two files, we use what we call a link tag in the HTML element. So you come to the index dot, you come to this semantics HTML here because that's what we want to apply. That's what we want to link our CSS style to. So you can either do it above the title tag or below the title tag. So I'm just going to come under it, but still within the head tag. So I'll do link. So you don't have to climb it actually. So just do link. Just type link. Once you type link, you're going to see Mnet abbreviation here. Can you see link? Link atom CSS. So the one we are interested in is link double column CSS. Just click on it. Once you click on it, it's going to bring out this tag. So now this href is what will actually help us to be able to link to you'll be able to link our CSS file to the HTML file. So the value of the href has to be the same as the value of the CSS file name. So if the CSS file name is home.css, you have to come to the href and change it to home.css, because by default it comes with a style.css. Once you follow that method I showed you, when you type link double column CSS and you press enter, it's going to auto generate this for you. So you must ensure that the value of the href is the same as the CSS file name. If they are not the same, change it. So if the CSS file name is about.css, come to the href and change it to what? About.css, so that you can successfully link your CSS file to what? To the HTML file. So if I save it now, can you see it's going to what? Still work. And the advantage of this external CSS is that you can link this CSS file to different HTML. You can link the CSS file to different HTML file here, just using this link tag here. Simple. Using this link tag, and you are good to go. You are good to what? To go. So that's that. So let's look at the advantage. It promotes reusability and makes maintenance easier. Disadvantage is that it requires an additional HTTP request for the CSS file, like making request for a CSS file, like the link tag I showed you. So so we've looked at all of these. So let's look at CSS rule set. Let's look at selector, property, and value. Though I've been talking about it, so let's look at it in details now. So selector specifies the HTML elements to style. So selector specifies the HTML element you want to style. So whichever element you want to style, HTML element you want to style, you have to select it. So selecting it is called what? Selector. And property simply means the aspect of the elements to modify. What aspect of the element do you want to modify? Do you want to modify the color? Do you want to modify the margin? Do you want to modify the font size, the font weight, the text? No, different thing. And the value is the specific setting for the property. So if you want to modify the property of an element like the color, you have to give it a value. So the color can be red, color can be anything. So we are going to talk more on color in our next class, because our time is almost up. So but let's look at basic CSS selector. Basic CSS what? Selector. Basic CSS selector. So we are going to look at three today, then we'll end today's class. So we'll meet again on Monday. So basic CSS selector. Let's look at basic CSS selector. We have the element selector, the class selector, and the what? ID selector. So the element selector still means type selector. So it targets all instances of a specific HTML tag. It targets all instances of a specific HTML tag. So let's say, for example, this span that I have here, this is an element selector or type selector. So this will select all the span tag in my HTML file where I linked it. So apparently, if you have like 10 span tag in your HTML file, whatever style rule that you set here is going to affect the 10 span tag. But the thing is, if you only want a style rule to affect one particular span tag, even though you have like several span tag in your HTML file, but you want the style rule to be only be applied to a particular a particular span tag, then you have to go beyond using element selector to using either a class selector, an ID selector, and other different selectors that we are going to be looking at in the course of this training. So let's take it gradually. So though we've looked at type selector, so let's look at another one of type or element selector. So let's say for the H1 here, I want to select H1. So I'll come here, I'll do H1, and I'll give it a font size. Let me give it a font size of 48 pixel, and I want to give it a color of red. So if you save now, let's look at what we have here. Can you see it's now bigger? Samsung S24 Ultra is now bigger. You see? Good. So all these they are what? Type or element selector. So you can see we define the font size explicitly of each one and the color. Good. So that this is element selector. Sorry, yes, element or type selector. So let's look at class selector. Let's look at class selector. So for class selector, it targets element with a specific class attribute. It targets element with a specific what? Class attribute. So let's say in our semantic HTML file now, I don't think we have any file here that have um let's make this. So I'm just going to give one. So let me give this h2 a class of logo. So I'll give it a class attribute, and the value will be what? Logo. So I want to select this h2 by its class value. You get that now? So you can select this h2 element in different ways, guys. But let's just look at the three basic ways today. You can select this h2 one by its tag name or its element name. Number two, you can select this h2 by giving the h2 a class attribute. And three, you can select this h2 by giving it an ID attribute. So now we are giving it what? A class attribute. So let's look at how to select a a class attribute in CSS. Let's see how we can select a class attribute in CSS. So go to the style tag here. So to select a style attribute in CSS is very simple. Class in CSS is selected by what? Dot, a period symbol. Yes, period. Is selected by dot, dot. So class represent dot in CSS selector. So for me to be able to select this now, I'll just do dot. So this dot here represent what? Class. Just like the way hash tag represent what? ID. So dot represent class in CSS. So I'll come here, the semantic. So after the dot, I'll have to specify the value of what? Of the class. So the value of the class is what? Logo. So I will join them together. It has to be dot logo. So that means you are selecting the element that has the class of what? Logo. So that's what it means. Dot logo mean that you are selecting the class. You are selecting the element that has the class of what? Logo. So we are going to apply particular styling to it. So I'll give it a color. Let me still give it a color of red. So if you save and you come here, look at what we have. Can you see? Logo red. You get that now? So that's that. So this is for class selector. So even though if you hover on it now, it means that it's selecting the element that has the class of what? Logo. That has the class of what? Logo. But now let's say for example you have several elements here. Let's say you have several elements that has the class of what? Logo. Let's say you have H1 that has a class of logo. Sorry, H2 has a class of logo. Probably hold on. So yeah, as I was saying that an element you can have different element having the same class value. Different element having the same class value. So if you do the value of the class attribute is going to the styling that you are going to the styling or the CSS rule is going to affect all the element that has that class attribute, that has that class value. But let's say for example you only want to select one element that has a particular class value from every other element that has that same class value. All you just have to do is just okay, I want to select H2 that has the class value of what? Logo. So can you see if I over on this now, it's now different. It's showing us that we are selecting the element H2 that has the class of logo. But if we don't add this H2 logo now, and I save and I hover on the logo. If I don't have the issue and I hover on the logo, it's saying element. So it can be any element. So any element that is having the class value of logo, this styling will be applied to that element. But if I want to be more specific in selecting HTML, selecting my HTML element, I can say, okay, I want to select the H2 that has the class of what logo. You see that now? Fantastic. So you see, good. So that's that about class. So don't worry, as we keep, this CSS, once we go deeper into it, as we go further into it, you'll begin to understand some concept. You get that now? Because one of the most important aspect of CSS is one, understanding CSS selector, then two, box model, which we are going to look at. But first, understanding CSS selector, understanding how you can use different types of CSS selector to select HTML elements. All right, so let's look at ID selector. So ID selector targets element with a specific ID. Targets element with a specific what ID. So let's say for instance, I want to um, I want to style mm, I want to style this section. So I'll give it ID probably Samsung. Let me give it an ID of what Samsung. Let's say Samsung section. Let's give it an ID of Samsung for want of words. So I'll come here. So to select Samsung, to select the element that has the ID of what Samsung, you just do hashtag, still hashtag Samsung like this. Then you are good to go. So let me probably give this a border bottom. All of this we'll look at that later. Border bottom of 2 pixel, solid and gray. So if you save, you'll see something here. Can you see it's having a border bottom? Can you see it's border bottom? And I can give it probably a padding bottom of um 30 pixel. If you save, look at what we have. See that that's a space between the content and the border. So don't worry, you don't have to. If you don't understand padding and border, that will be when I'll be treating. I will explain that in details when I'll be treating box model. So you can see how we're able to select the element that has the ID of what Samsung. So the thing is, whenever you're using an ID, make sure you use an ID for, ID simply means unique identifier. Use it for, don't use the value of that ID in another element. Let it be unique to a particular element. So you don't go to footer and give the ID a value of Samsung. It doesn't make sense. So use ID when you know that you don't want to use the value of that ID in another element. So make it unique. So you get that now. So that is that. So these are the three basic ways we can select HTML element with CSS selector. So we have element selector, ID selector, and class selector. So we are going to, in our next class, we are going to look at hierarchy, specificity, and yes, hierarchy and specificity. So let's say, for example, this is what I'm talking about here. Let's say if you give the same CSS style rule to an element to, okay, this is what I'm talking about here. Let's say we have H1 here. This H1, then I give it a class of um, title, and I also give it an ID of what title. There are two different things. Oh. I give it an ID of title. Now watch. Apparently, we already have H1 here. We gave it a font size of what 48 pixel and a color of what red. So this is what element selector. See that now element selector. If you hover on it, can you see the selector specificity is 001. It's very very low. So the specificity is very very low. So that same H1 that has the class of what title and ID of what title, I'm going to select the H1 that has a class of title. So I'll just do dot title. So I can just do H1 dot title, but since that's the only H1 I have and I'm not using the class value in other elements, I'll just do dot title. Then I can give it a color. I'll give it a color of yellow. Watch, I give the color of yellow. But though I've defined H1 here, even though title is an element inside of what? Is an attribute of H1. If I over on H1, look at the specificity, is 001. But look at for the class, is 01 is 0. So that means this one here has more specificity than what? The class selector has more specificity than the element selector. So it therefore means that the CSS rule that I have in the class will override the CSS rule that I have in the element selector. Why? Because class selector has a higher specificity rule over element selector. Now watch what we're going to get. Can you see yellow? You see that now? Yellow. So that's that. So let's look at ID. So I'm going to do hashtag ID, and I'll give this a color of let me give it a color of tomato. So if I give it a color of tomato over on ID now, sorry, not ID, hashtag title, sorry. Hashtag title, if you over on it, look at the specificity. The specificity is what? 1. So this is 1 here. So can you see 1? For class is what? Is 01. For element selector is what? Is 001. So that means that ID selector has a higher specificity over class selector and element selector. So let's see. So since ID has a higher specificity over class selector and element selector, it means that the styling that I have here will override every other styling for that same element. So now can you see tomato color? So now the one that has higher specificity than ID itself is inline CSS. So if I come here and I do a style tag here and I call this color of green. So inline CSS has a higher specificity than ID selector. So if I come here now, where is it? Style. Okay, green. I wrote double R instead of double E. So if I save, let's see what we get. Can you see green? So you see the hierarchy now. So based on the hierarchy, it's going to be um, the highest. The highest is inline, followed by ID, followed by um, class, and followed by what? Element selector. So the highest specificity goes to inline, followed by ID, followed by class, and followed by element selector. So the lowest one is element, followed by class, ID, and what? Inline element or inline CSS. So you see that now. But let's say for example, now that we know um that inline CSS has higher specificity than ID selector, class selector, and element selector. But what if we want to still make sure that I want to make this element selector now, this one that has the color of red, I want it to override every other um, CSS rule that I've defined for the class, the title, and the inline. So I want this to override it, but though because this one has a lower specificity, so it's being overridden. So what can I do to make sure this color, this CSS property override every other CSS property that I define for the ones that have higher specificity, that's the ID, the class, and the inline CSS. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use what we call exclamation mark importance. So I'll do importance like this. So this importance, if you hover on it, it it has a way of giving this higher importance than every other selector. So if you do this now, now you're going to see something. You're going to see what? You're going to see this back. So you see that now. So it override the hierarchy of specificity, though inline CSS is having a higher specificity. So you are supposed to say inline styling set, but though this override it, this important rule overrides every other CSS specificity that we have. So it overrides it. So I think I've done justice to that. So so in our next class, we are going to be looking at group grouping and combining selectors. We look at common properties. We look at all of these. I think that's why I'm going to introduce box model and all of this here. Then also and what again? Let's see. All right, so no problem. Let's see if we'll be able to achieve all of this in our next class. So, but until then, we are done for today. And if you are watching this video, or if you are new to my YouTube channel, please, and you enjoy the content, please subscribe, like, and comment. Subscribe, like, and comment. It encourages me to do more and to post more videos on my YouTube channel. You get? All right. Bye bye. See you some other time.